Google Plus.
I know it.
All right, there we go. We're out of here, folks, for another week. All right. Okay, folks, here we are for another week, Friday Chat, and this week we're joined by Bill Slawski. Needs no introduction, but I already did, so forget it.
You did.
Go Fish Digital these days, isn't it, or what is it?
Go Fish Digital.
Go Fish
right.
Digital. Yeah, I never even thought about that until now. I've known about it, and I just thought about it. What do you guys do at the? What do you do around the office? Has anybody got links to Pharma? Go Fish. Okay. Anybody got links to? All right. So, okay, what we're getting into today is something that Bill and I had talked about privately a few times over the last couple of weeks. And Bill had been saying he was doing, I was like, what are you up to lately, Bill? And he's like, well, I'm doing some entity audits. And I was like, okay, what is that? I was like, never heard of such a thing. Bill's just got to be like that, He just can't be doing something normal like us. He has to make something up. So I thought it'd be really cool and bring Bill in, and because we have talked about what it is, and I just thought it was worth sharing with the world. And Bill needed a dry run because apparently he's got a couple of conferences to do this at over the coming month or next month or so. What are the two conferences you're doing there, brother?
I'm doing a Semantic Technology and Business conference in San Jose next week, and it's actually an SEO track, but a lot of the people involved aren't SEOs. There are people from the search engines, for instance, attending, and there are a lot of tool makers who make semantic type tools. But
as we were saying before the show, you said search engines plural, so there are more than one of them.
Oh yeah, there are even people from Yahoo who maybe will have a search engine again one of these days.
I was going to say, have they changed it from an exclamation mark to a question mark yet?
No, I think that's as long as Ben and Jerry or Chief Yahoo's there.
Chief Yahoo's, that just doesn't even sound right.
That's your job titles.
Okay, so I guess before we get going, let's break down the concept of entities for everyone, Bill, and I guess you could even feel free to address brands being the new links and brand mentions and things of that nature. But I guess before we even get going, let's lay it out for them exactly what we mean by entities as far as search is concerned.
Okay, so let's say that somebody does a search at Google for what movie does Robert Duvall say that he loves the smell of napalm in the morning? And Google takes that, and instead of looking at page titles and all and so on, instead it takes those facts and it searches for them.
That's why I don't read the chat when I'm trying to talk to them.
In a knowledge base. Yes, I was reading the chat and people are funny. So Google says, okay, who is this Robert Duvall guy? Oh, he's an actor. He's appeared in all these movies. Where does love the smell of napalm in the morning show up? That's a famous quote from this movie, which Robert Duvall acts in. So the movie is Apocalypse Now, and Google may show search results for Apocalypse Now, even though it didn't search for Robert Duvall or smell of napalm in the morning to find that site, find a site related to that. Instead, it shows results for that entity type search, that knowledge base search, and the result is that particular movie. So entities are mentions of people, places, or things that search engines find as they're either crawling around the web or through places like Wikipedia or Freebase or some other knowledge-based type sites, and Google looks for facts related to those, tries to identify a type related to the entity as well. So a type might be a business, and Google local search is actually filled with entity types. It's a big directory of businesses. It finds those by treating them a lot like any other type of entity. It looks for business name, it looks for geographic information related to a business. It finds all the documents it can and then clusters the facts for those to try to identify different ones. So if it finds a Starbucks and says, okay, let's look at all these Starbucks entities. There might, in some cities, there's one on every corner. So it might have lots of clusters with different locations that in some cases are very near each other. Or it may say, okay, this business that has a name, the Gainesville Crab Hut. There's only one of those. We've taken all the pages we can find mentions of it and clustered the facts about it, and they're all the same. They're really consistent. There's just one entity with that name. So that type of clustering helps them identify which entities are where and how many of them there might be. I wrote a blog post a couple days ago and mentioned that Google does this with people.
Right,
so,
the Michael Jackson thing. So
right,
you've got Michael Jackson, the singer, and the other one was a politician, was he, I believe? Or
he was a deputy director of Homeland Security.
Oh, right, yeah, that's what it was. So yeah, and it's going to look for concepts or other entities related to that entity to better understand the relations of it, so then when a query comes in, it can better serve the result to match.
Right, so one of those Michael Jacksons was a member of the Homeland Security Group, and the other Michael Jackson was a member of the Jackson 5. So very, very different things, and a lot of the facts associated with those entities were different. What Google said in that patent, too, was it may decide which entity is the most important based upon how many different documents they show up in on the web. So Michael Jackson with the
so that would be, for an instance, maybe that someone was a little more ambiguous with the query, and so Google's got to decide, which results to show. So we're going to say that more than likely the singer is the one they're looking for, but we'll also put this guy in as well, but just not as prominent. Is that the kind of idea why they're trying to make the associations?
So someone might search for Michael Jackson, and the guy who wore a glove on his left hand for no apparent reason might show up in the knowledge panel, because he's mentioned a lot more frequently than the guy from Homeland Security.
But if the person doing the search goes to Homeland Security sites and is into Homeland Security and is into that niche or whatever, Google might be able to use personalization to show the Michael Jackson from Homeland Security as opposed to the singer?
Google hasn't shown any effort to personalize knowledge-based type point. You're getting a lot of feedback.
Yeah, someone's got an echo.
Okay. I'm sure that kind of personalization will become part of these different entity search elements in the future, but they're not at this point.
Bill, I was just reading about roles on schema roles. Do you think that'll help in the disambiguation of entities, that Google eventually roll that into their stuff too? Or?
Google's been doing a lot of stuff on its own when it comes to entities, identifying entities, determining what type they are, and so on. They've got a lot of people working at places like Freebase, and they also use knowledge bases like Wikipedia. While site owners are helpful to them when they use schema, and as a site owner, it's more likely that the things you're marking up with metadata are going to be recognized by Google. I think the effort, the website owner effort to use schema is so small in comparison to Google's efforts to crawl the web and collect facts and cluster them and so on. So schema is good, but it's just a tiny little effort, a drop in the bucket in comparison. That may change in the future, but there's no guarantee. Okay, so I was going to talk not only about entities, I was going to talk about entity audits. So let me explain what I mean.
Right. So now we've got the entities covered. Yeah, this is what kind of intrigued me and got me talking to you a couple of weeks ago in the first place was, what is an entity audit, I guess, and what is the purpose or end goal for a client when you're doing one? How's that?
Mm-hmm. So Google will sometimes take certain words or phrases or so on and associate them with specific entities. One example I like to use is Space Needle. If I type a query that is something like Space Needle hours, I want to go visit the attraction in Seattle. The first 4 search results are from spaceneedle.com because it said, okay, this word, this phrase, it's an entity appearing in my query, and I'm going to assume that it's a site search. I'm going to return a bunch of search results that actually show stuff about hours for the Space Needle from the spaceneedle.com website. If I type in as a query SEO by the sea and then patents, the first 15 search results are from SEObythesea.com because Google seems to associate SEO by the sea with patents.
It's weird how that might happen. I don't know why. But yeah, so those are domain clustering kind of results, I would assume, right?
Well, yeah, except Google doesn't cluster the way it used to.
Yeah.
It doesn't indent results like it did.
Yeah. Once upon a time, you get the indented ones, and now you just get to eat up the whole page now.
Right. So Google actually dialed that back a while ago. It used to be when you did that Space Needle hours query, the first 8 results would be from spaceneedle.com, and now it's only 4. So they've reduced it. They've increased the diversity of domains that appear in results. I guess they believe they had it turned up too high. Okay, so some search results do look to see if there's an entity present. So they might do that type of association and imply a site search. So that's one of the things I look for in an entity audit, whether or not Google's clustering some results like that. Another thing is whether or not a knowledge panel shows up. So I worked with a client that was a local school, and it's in a small town in southern Virginia that shares it's Western Virginia. It shares a border with West Virginia, and there's another school of the same name or very similar name, like a mile away from it. So one of them's like Bluefield College, and the other one's Bluefield State College. And so the question is, what do you get in Google when you search for Bluefield classes or Bluefield degrees? Which one shows up? Okay. Do you want me to let you guys talk and share your discoveries? I mean, there are like 10 of us here. I don't mind answering questions if you want to answer questions.
Yeah, if we got anything on so far, you might as well throw them out there before we keep going, folks.
Okay.
I didn't have any questions there, Bill.
It was more of a.
I just know that Google is doing some personalization. For example, when I search Barry Schwartz, when I'm logged in, it'll show Barry Schwartz, the SEO guy. But when I'm not logged in, or if I go global, or if I go to a random data center, it'll show Barry Schwartz, the psychologist.
Does it show them as a knowledge panel? Or is it just search results, normal search result?
Both. Both.
So you get Barry Schwartz from SEO Roundtable when you're logged in? And
Yes.
you get Barry Schwartz from University of Maryland.
Somebody's got their speakers up.
Josh.
I can.
But yeah,
I'll show you.
like I'll search, even if I search myself with other accounts and stuff, I'll actually get a little knowledge graph panel. But if I'm, searching logged out or anonymous.
Is the feedback better now?
Hold on, that's me. We'll speak. Yeah, we're hearing speakers still in the background.
Okay, I can fix that.
Okay.
Yeah, unless someone else has external speakers.
Okay, so Bill, when you first started, so how long have you been doing these kind of audits? How's that? Let me get started there. Meaning, when did this idea come up, and when did you start thinking it would be something valuable to do for the clients and so on?
We started doing them about 4 months ago. We wanted to see what happens in search results for clients, what shows up, how they're presented. So we wanted to look to see what would appear in knowledge panels for them, what would appear in site links, how many results would appear when we put their domain name or put the name of their business or organization and put other words, if multiple results would show up. We wanted to see what would happen if they shared a name or had a very similar name to someone else, to see if there was some type of confusion between the two. In a lot of this.
How's that going? Is it still earlier, or are you seeing some results that are working, or what's the experience been with them?
You find out certain things, like we had one client who presents themselves as apartments for rent in like 80% of the places they appear on the web. And then in the other 20%, they treat their apartments as a hotel, and they have people who can book apartments overnight or for a week or however long. So they've got sort of two different types of entity listings on the web, and we talked to them about that, and they decided they would rather focus on the apartments. So we worked to remove some of the hotel listings because we feared they'd okay, I got
you. So the concept is that you're trying to make the associations of what the entity is stronger based upon the goals of what they have?
Yeah.
Meaning is that why you were trying to lessen out the hotel type of stuff and lean more on the apartments, or?
Right. Yeah, we wanted to focus more. We wanted to another same place. They have a domain name that the apartment complex, the apartment name, the domain name wasn't available. So they came up with a longer domain name that added a word or two. And and it's unlikely that people actually search for the business under the domain name in most instances, because it's just really isn't the name of the business. but when you do search for the domain name, you get like 6 site links showing up for the apartment complex. When you search for the business name, you get 2. So that was one of the things that we wanted to do. We discovered doing the audit. We wanted to increase the number of site links that appeared for them when someone searched for the business name. Okay. Oh, my screen isn't.
So, Bill, would you use that information? For instance, in this case, you chose to basically target your activity at this better set of keywords, correct? And you learned that doing this entity audit. Is that your saying?
It wasn't necessarily keywords, but okay, this apartment complex. This apartment complex is in Northern Virginia. It has an elevator down to the Washington Metro, the underground subway that surrounds Washington, D.C. and goes through parts of Virginia and Maryland. Their next neighborhood over is known as Pentagon City, and there are a lot of defense contractors with headquarters underground, right in that neighborhood, a block or 2 away. They have a DEA museum. I guess maybe they aren't allowed to show who some of the agents are who like operated covertly, but they can still build statues to them and give them awards and show them off in the museum.
Terry, there's a big table with their biggest bust ever, and you just go up and take samples.
I was going to say, what is that where they keep all the...
I don't know, but I'm interested now because
That's a different entity.
What do you put in a DEA museum? They've got a couple of the biggest shopping malls in Virginia within a couple blocks. They say on their website you don't have to worry about buying gasoline if you live in this apartment complex because you can walk to everything, everywhere. They don't tell you where like the schools are or the daycare, which is something you'd probably want to know if you're in an apartment complex. They don't tell you about a lot of
so even amenities and stuff like that, you want to have entity association to what surrounds it. Like I was talking to Terry about this the other day, and he's in the leasing world as well, their client.
Yeah.
And right outside of him is his client's building is a historic building called Union Station, and so it's talking about that or associating about the various entities that are local to that business are also something you want to tie in or what?
Right. So this place has a dog park, and they have like 15, 20 pictures of the dog park. They must like pets, but they've got a huge swimming pool. As well, and they don't mention on their website at all that they've got a pool, and they probably should. That's one of the attributes of an apartment complex that helps convince people to rent the apartment.
So Bill, are you talking about that more from the standpoint of conversion, or that common apartment complex amenities are an entity item that Google would use?
Well, he gave me an example the other day, Bill, that if someone was searching maybe, hotel near such and such airport with a swimming pool, you know what I mean? That query now builds out what they're looking for from an entity. So what are the associations with that entity that you've made key to Google? Have you leaned on the various amenities around it? Have you leaned on the things that it provides as far as bringing depth to that entity? Because if someone's searching for something on that basis, you're going to come up for it. Anyways, all that built together.
So in audit, I like to look and see what related entities there are with an entity that might be the focus of the website we're looking at. What other things are there? These things like the shopping centers that are nearby, the elevator to the underground metro, the fact that the metro is right there, that it connects them to
or Terry, like in your case, you guys could be, have things like great view of the CN Tower, the Sky Dome, stuff like that. You know what I mean, Terry? So you're associating that building with that entity with other entities that are around it, right?
Yeah, that's what I was going to say to Bill. When you're doing this audit, then you're also looking for other entities in the area, if it's a location or etc.
Yeah. We want to identify what other nearby related entities there might be, and by related, we could mean something like if the website belongs to an author, what books has he written? If the website belongs to an actor, what movies has he or she been in? If the website's an apartment complex, what other buildings are nearby that people who live there might find useful? So we try to get a sense of that. We also try to define different aspects or elements of each of those entities that people might find helpful too. Like I was saying, if you're going to move in, if you're going to live there, you have kids, you want to know where the schools are. You want to know where the parks are. You want to know where the daycare is. Those are things that are helpful to you from a content creation perspective. But they can also help you in searches. We're not doing keyword research here, but the way Google's enabled knowledge-based type searches is you could do a search for something like tell me about an apartment complex which has a swimming pool and is near a school, within a mile or so of a school. And Google would say, okay, well, here's a list of nearby apartment complexes that are near a school that have swimming pools. You don't have to match strings of words exactly. You just have to match elements or aspects of an entity. In this case, a specific apartment complex. So that's sort of what we're moving towards in the future with search. As we get more, as knowledge bases grow and show more things. Google, one of the big knowledge bases Google uses is Freebase. And when they bought that a couple years ago, it had about 12 million entities in it. And the last number I saw for Freebase was 250 million entities. So it's grown a lot, but it probably still has a lot more to go. Google Local is probably one of the biggest examples of a knowledge base that you could find, because it lists so many businesses, which are entities. It lists parks, schools, other places that are associated with geographic locations. So it's not just businesses, but the idea that a mention or a citation can help a business rank better in local search is tied to the way knowledge bases work and the way they collect information, facts, and so on about entities. The two are very, very similar. So, like I was saying, we can use this type of stuff to see if there's content we should create for a website. And with this apartment website, after we did all the entity research, we realized they were underreporting a lot of the stuff nearby. People have different reasons for moving one place or another, but in a lot of cases, location is really important. Is it close to school? Is it close to work? Is it close to school? How far will I have to commute? And so on. And by including some of the stuff about this apartment complex that we found that wasn't on there, like the fact that there is an elevator right to the Washington Metro within their building. And people can hop on that, get on the Metro, and be at work within minutes. If they want to tour all the Smithsonian museums, which are free. A lot of the Metro stops are near most of the Smithsonian museums. So you know, walk less than half a mile, and you're at 48 different museums they're all free. It'd be a great thing to if you have kids and you want them to see.
And do you think, you know, in your mind at least, when you're coming along with this idea and you're building it the last 4 months, you know, is there a part of you that's thinking, you know, again, we're going past the keyword search now, we're getting into the world of conversational search, and I think at some point in the next 5-10 years, you know, voice search will be the norm over people typing searches in it like they used to. So this whole conceptual building of these blocks and relations entity-wise, is that kind of what you guys are thinking, meaning past the keyword, or, you know, the things, not the strings, not things kind of thing, or what was the thinking when you guys started going in this direction?
Okay, one of the things I saw about 4 or 5 months ago was Microsoft come out with a patent where they made fun of Watson. And they said, Watson's never going to be the search engine that we are because we're better at natural language processing. We can understand these complicated queries. And
I don't even, you know, I would even subscribe to that, because I've mentioned many times watching my kids with stuff like their Xbox Connect. You know what I mean? The voice capabilities Microsoft has, and how much, you know, how deep it is compared to like when I played with Google's voice search when it came out last year. I was like, wow, you guys are a little behind on this one, because Microsoft, you know, they really do. You could talk to the Xbox now. It's pretty amazing, to be honest. You know?
Okay, so the guy who's a chief researcher at Microsoft sort of gives Ray Kurzweil a run for his money. He's written software that does poetry in Chinese. He's won awards for the translation programs that he's created that deal with Asian languages, Japanese, Chinese, Korean.
Which have traditionally been a problem. I read many a paper out of Google and elsewhere that you know, those are some of the trickiest ones from over the years.
Right. Absolutely. They're difficult. Instead of being able to do things like the statistical language translation stuff that Google does, where you capture, you go through a document and you break it down into strings of 2 words, strings of 3 words, strings of 4 words, up to 5 words, and you do that for lots of documents. And the order that those words appear in, you create frequencies about them and create statistics, and it allows you to tell whether or not a page is in U.S. English or British English based upon word orders and how those words are used, and you can drill down a little bit deeper in terms of where people might be from based upon that type of stuff.
And so you kind of felt that, you know, as this evolves to this direction, that the whole concept of building stronger entities and any associations and the concepts related to an entity was kind of where you saw the future, or what?
Mm-hmm. I mentioned the Microsoft patent where they made fun of Watson because the guy who wrote that said we don't necessarily believe in this huge knowledge base, but we do believe in the power of natural language processing to help understand queries and answer more complicated queries. And he gave an example of a question that was a lot like a Jeopardy question, and it was something like which composer attended Mozart's funeral. And so you do the same type of thing.
Salieri? Was it Salieri? Maybe, I don't know.
I think they were asking about another guy, but that's the guy who plays the villain in the movie.
Yes, well, yeah, that's it. Depth of my knowledge here, man.
Right, but the idea that you can use entities in a query and the exact wording or phraseology you use doesn't have to be a type of thing where you're matching strings of words, as long as you're capturing the concepts, the things that when Google introduced the knowledge base, they added the phrase to their mention of it, things, not strings, right? And so with our idea with an entity audit is that it's not something that we do in place of an SEO audit. It's something that we do in addition. We can use it to add additional content that we think should be included on a site. We can do it to make it possible for a site to mention things that they otherwise wouldn't mention that might be searched upon with one of these entity type searches. So we're increasing the amount of times, but we also wanted to look to see how site, how business was being represented in Google, in knowledge panels, in snippets, in site links, if they were being associated with specific words or phrases, so that Google was identifying them in a query and treating results as if they to imply a site search, so Google might return a lot more results for those. These types of audits were an extra element. To a degree, there some of the things that we do in them were being done in local search optimization by getting extra mentions in local directories, geolocal directories. You increase your ability to rank well. When you talk about local search, one of the ranking factors is something they call web prominence, which is how much of a presence you actually have with this business on the web. How many times has Google found it when it's crawled and found some type of geographic location?
Bill, would you say that's part of the number of documents idea from you mentioned early, that Google would look at the number of documents?
Right. It's the kind of thing that shows up in some of the earlier local search patents. And they've done a couple of videos. They did one at one point where they said we pretty much have 3 ranking factors for local search. One of them is how relevant is the name of the business to the query someone's performing. Number 2 is how much web prominence there is, and that's how many times have they been mentioned in documents. The third one is distance. So Google's distance is a really important one, because you're probably not going to drive more than a few miles from most types of businesses.
Right. Well, Bill, even that though, right, that has to do with 2 entities, right? Me and the thing I was searching for, right?
Sometimes.
In other words, distance is one of the aspects of relationship that's impacting that search.
Right, but
but again, Bill number 2. Bill, I've covered a couple of patents just last year that were interesting in that it was more of a predictive search on a mobile basis, meaning, if you go every September, October, let's say, in the States, November, Thanksgiving, let's say you go from Chicago down over to, Philadelphia or something every year at this time, it can make an inference that you're going to visit family or somebody there, and literally you being the entity and distance being a relative concept, they talked about serving different results based upon your movement and where you might be. Again, if Monday to Friday you're going from this part of town to this part of town, they make that leap that, okay, you probably work here. You know what I mean? Or that, geographically placing you on your mobile phone, or your searches or a combination of both, you're going golfing in the summer, but you don't do it in the winter, and so on and so on. So the geographic predictiveness of what they were showing, or at least in the patent talking about showing, was also based on the temporality and the movements that the user was making over time.
Right.
Weekly, daily, or annually, or whatever. It talked about trying to serve results based upon predictive measures like that.
Well, I'm thinking about the immediate.
Okay, so Google has mentioned the searcher as an entity in about 5 patents I've seen from them. Okay?
Right.
So it doesn't usually frame what it's describing in terms of the searcher being one entity in some relationship with a business as another entity. It doesn't.
Right. Yeah, it's still a user. It's still a user. Yeah.
It assumes that most people recognize that. You're searching for a business. I'm going to show you a business that's nearby.
Just to note something real quick. On my phone, I don't use any Google location services.
Right.
I can't use their maps. They won't give me a map. They won't give me directions.
Yeah,
even if I
because
put in a
they don't have
location.
idea where you are.
What's that?
Because they don't have a clue where you are.
Right, but even if I just try to use maps and like put in locations, it won't let me do it if I'm not using location services.
Right.
So in mobile, it might be something to be looked at.
Well, Bill, I was thinking of this in a way of it's a sense. When I say I want pizza places near me, right? I've got a query that has keywords and a kind of command to it, the nearby. And so immediately I kind of disambiguate things about me as an entity by saying nearby. Now, assuming
right, but there's a lot of stuff in patents where it really they use phrases like those knowledgeable in the art and stuff. And so the patent,
it's the catch-all, baby.
Right. So the Siri patent is like 150 pages long, and they will say you are an entity. And so is this business. And so most of Google's patents don't say stuff like that. They don't describe stuff like that in that way. But you can probably assume
you're the user, meaning the person using the service to find an entity. Meaning they're not indexing you per se, Bill. You know what I mean? They're not. You know.
But in all honesty, it's really just not that important. The fact that you are an entity searching for another entity. They're not going to bother to include that. That's like telling us that implied links are important, and then having somebody come along. Oh, they must mean brand mentions. It's not. So Google uses distance as one of its ranking signals for businesses in local search because it wants to show you things that are nearby. Now, sometimes when you do those searches, you override that distance by saying, you know, I'm going on a trip to California next week. I'm going to San Jose. I want to find all the restaurants that are near my hotel.
Okay, so Bill, when I do a search, let's say local aside, and let's talk about the kind of personalization that can happen in the SERPs where Google will give me results from my query of let's maybe entity is the wrong word, but let's say of entities who are generally located where I am. I'm not talking about local listings, but a localized search result. Are you saying that that has nothing to do with, because that seems like a kind of disambiguation. In other words, Google's making a guess that I think you're looking for these kinds of things probably that are in your state or region.
Okay, what I'm saying is Google isn't omniscient. It's not all knowing. It doesn't. It searches.
Can you prove that?
Search is in its infancy. If you ask any search engineers how much more they have to work on when it comes to search, they'll tell you everything. What we're seeing is this sliver.
So the entity thing is not really anything actionable at this point? It's just a novelty?
No, I didn't say that. What I said was Google doesn't care that you're an entity when you're doing search. Google does. Google does care that you're a searcher. Google doesn't care that you're 5'10", 190 pounds, brown hair, brown eyes, that you drive a certain type of car, that you live in a certain type of house, that you do a certain type of job. Those facts associated with you are unimportant to Google. It doesn't delve that deeply into finding you the closest pizzeria. That's not part of the process it goes through. Google does look at entities and stuff associated with them and is building them into a knowledge base, but it doesn't quite get to that level of understanding individual searchers to that depth, to that level. Now, it may take your search history, things that you've looked at, your frequency of looking at them, and so on, and track some of those things. But with all the concern that people are going to get upset because personally identifiable information regarding them might be shared, Google's actually done some things to quarantine some of the data that might be shared about you when you use a location-based service.
Yeah, to think of it in the terms you're saying there is that to think that, you know, Google's, well, I think, you know, a way, I'll try it, but what he's saying, Bill, is that Google's not trying to understand you demographically. You know, again, even on a geographic level, it might seem personalized, but it's more just, you know, what your location is. They're not trying to figure out, you know, is this Bill's house, and, you know, where does Bill work, and what does he do for a living, and things of that nature, which is how you would define an entity. When you're a user, you're just a user typing in queries. Like he said, like the other Bill was saying, you know, you can use search history, you can use other elements, and even reformatting the queries during a given task or something, but it's not the same as defining an entity, meaning, you know, Jaguar the cat, Jaguar the operating system, you know, Jaguar the football team. That's an entity, and they're going to associate concepts with that to understand them better. You know what I mean? Whereas you as a user, I don't think, and I agree with Bill on that to a degree, that I don't think they're really trying to figure you out as an entity per se, as a user. I think they're more trying to service results, whereas the other side of the entity is more about the indexing and returning of results as opposed to the user who's putting it in. Considering them an entity and relating them to things, I think gets a little muddy too.
And the entity audits that we're trying to do don't look at that type of stuff, don't look at personalization, don't include any Google Now type predictive algorithm analysis. We're looking at ways that companies, businesses, websites might appear in search results based upon unique ways that Google uses to treat entities. And by entities, I mean the entities on the website, the entities related to the website, not the entities related to a searcher.
So, Bill, can you guys hear me?
Yes.
Is there better feedback now, or no feedback?
You're good, man. You're perfect. You're good to go, bro.
So, in terms of personalization, then, do you think they're adding that as a filter after the fact, or because I can show you a search where I search for Barry Schwartz.
You have shown that a couple times now. I've seen it. It's fine. It's
so is that a filter after the fact?
Not something that we do with our entity audits at all at this point in time. It's personalization. It's been around since at least 2005. So Google's added that to knowledge panels. It still really hasn't changed since 2005, and it's not
relevant.
It's not relevant to this the topic of this HOA.
Okay.
Okay. I'm trying to actually give a presentation and talk about audits. And I understand. I appreciate the fact that you want to ask questions that interest you, but the fact that personalization applies to knowledge panels in search results is a wonderful thing. Don't get me wrong, but it's not helping your clients or my clients, so it's not necessarily going to be part of the audit I do. It's not okay. So when I work with the apartment complex, and they're selling themselves as hotels in some places, and selling themselves as an apartment complex in other places, telling them that they're probably confusing Google because they can't decide upon a business model that makes it easy to tell Google what type of entity they are. that's part of an audit where they can actually take some type of action that can impact that in a positive way. When somebody does that search for, tell me about all the nearby apartments that have elevators to the metro and swimming pools, and Google says, okay, I know of one. It's definitely an apartment. It's not a hotel, and it can point that one out and say, okay, that's the the name of the city apartment complex right here. So that's part of an audit that provides an actionable result. The fact that
and what kind of tactics do you employ to get those concepts going? Is it part of the on-site content program? Is it off-site listings? Like a Yelp or Google Local, or what various elements do you use to reinforce that entity?
Okay,
so I think because that's going to be what people are asking first: is how do I implement it, or what actionable advice am I giving to the customer, the client?
Right. So Google tries to identify entities by looking at all the documents it can on the web that maybe have the name of that entity on them. So if there are 10,000 listings in different hotel directories and stuff like that mention this place and say it's a hotel, we'd want to get rid of those, so that Google's only looking at the ones that say it's an apartment complex.
Bill, the question.
Yeah.
In Vegas, it's quite common for them to be both. To be a hotel at one level and apartments at another.
Right.
So what do you do in that circumstance?
In that circumstance, you let them be that way. Google will likely treat them as separate entities because the definitions don't match up. It's like when people do local search and they tell you, make sure your NAP is consistent. Well, this is not, when you're dealing with entities, it's more than just name, address, phone number. It's and some entities are multiple things. Ronald Reagan was an actor. Ronald Reagan was a politician. He did more than one type of thing. So.
And it's an airport.
It's an airport.
Bill?
Yes.
So in Christine's situation there in Vegas with a hotel apartment complex that are married to each other, we could still try to find commonality to let them connect those two entities to the location, right? I mean,
absolutely. We don't know for certain whether or not Google will treat them as the same entity or not. We can try to get that to happen.
Right.
Right.
So then the authority for that entity on that site may be stronger, so your audit would show them they need to strengthen that other entity in order to get the maybe the right page they want, ranking, etc. Right, Bill? Is that kind of how you use the audits?
You could think about possibly setting up two different websites, especially if they go by different names and they're the same place, which is the situation involving my hotel apartment complex. They used one name as a hotel and a different name as an apartment complex. But we haven't suggested two different sites, but that's one possibility. There are different businesses. One is definitely focused upon renting the apartment out on a monthly basis and paying rent directly to a landlord. A hotel type business allows you to check to see whether or not rooms are available at certain days and times and so on, and check in and check out at dates or times specified to you. So because they function differently as a business and your website might be different for each of those. You might want 2 different websites, or to try 2 different websites. I'm not saying that you have to do that.
Yeah, I would think that even if they do see them as 2 separate entities, as if you can establish the tie between the 2, that's almost an advantage.
Yeah.
Because you're going to have a separate apartment complex manager, hotel manager, separate services, separate clientele. You know, why would you want them to be seen as the same entity, really?
That's where that's why I asked about the roles in Schema, because it does smooth out a lot of that stuff.
No, it defines one type, but it doesn't define...
Not actually. The roles, Bill, not Schema. There's a new part of Schema called roles.
Right.
That show, that disambiguate some of those terms, like football player,
actor, politician, right.
Yeah, right. Like one guy could have multiple. Could be, a player on a team, but he's also the quarterback. That sort of thing, to disambiguate the members on a team too, kind of, right? That's how I kind of saw it being useful, because that's harder to do.
So like I was saying, we've been only doing these about 4 months, so we're working through and figuring it out.
Well, that's how, when you share here, that's what we're doing. We're trying to figure out help you too, right? It's that two-way street.
Well, it would sound like the Vegas thing is a situation where that's probably simply going to be problematic for the foreseeable future, as Google tries to catch up, right, or at least finesse things a bit more. It's a reason for businesses to consider how they brand what they're doing. If you go into this, I would assume with somebody doing an entity audit for you, if you know that Google's going to have trouble with your single brand trying to be 2 different things, even if they are related, at least you understand the level of difficulty that you're facing, which might help you say, well, we're going to have to put money into something else until Bill tells us Google is getting better with.
Well,
also direct you on
roles for Schema makes sense in the situation we were talking about with places that function both as apartments and hotels.
See, Bill, like something you mentioned before when they were talking about, well, maybe using 2 websites, now you're back to a local business thing, which would be 2 websites, but now are you going to have 2 listings on a lot of these, one for the hotel side, one for the apartment side? Obviously, that's problematic.
No.
I told you that when you do those listings,
you present hotels.
Both. I'm sorry to cut you off, Bill.
That's okay. Yeah, you're exactly right, Terry.
Hey, Bill.
Yes.
I've been dabbling around in Freebase just for a few months, and for any given topic, you can assert different types to any given topic. And so I'm thinking that, maybe this is a way to connect a topic to different types in the graph.
Freebase wants you to be at least one type of entity. So yeah, being multiple types of entities probably isn't a problem. The thing is, though, when you're a certain type of entity, you have different attributes associated with it. You want to try to fill those in too. So if you're like a school, there's certain information that you need to provide that makes you look like a school that fits with that entity type. If you're an airport, there are other definitions or attributes that are important. So if you're place where people learn to become a pilot, but you're also an airport, you sort of have that dual role. type thing going on there, and you need to address both, and make sure that you show both. Working with a guy who's an author right now, and he also does presentations on public TV related to the topics he's written books about. So he's performing multiple roles, and we'd want to define both types of roles in a place like Freebase.
So maybe the number of properties assigned to a given type in Freebase might have some weighting.
Freebase really, I haven't seen something that allows you to provide weight to Freebase. I am going through a patent from Google right now that talks about assigning entity types, and it does mention weights, and Google trying to assess and assign weights to people. So if you're like an actor and you're like head of the Screen Actors Guild or something, you're sort of a politician, but you only do that every once in a while, and you act in lots of movies, so you're more of an actor than a politician. You'd want that to show. If you're an apartment complex who'd prefer to rent out as many apartments as possible, but you also rent rooms like a hotel, that may be a business decision in the making. Which you prefer to do?
Bill, would you use your entity audit kind of like how we used to do with keywords, where we try and build the basket around the main term? Is that kind of what you're doing too?
Oh, we're to some degree it's like a keyword audit, in that you can find related entities and things that are interesting about them that you might want to put and include on your website somehow.
Right, that's what I was thinking of. You know, like when you're writing about a gas station, you want to have the other word.
Right. So it's almost like it's like using the semantic concepts to build out a page. Now you're using semantic or relevant entity concepts to fill out your core entity. Yeah.
And with attributes of an entity, one way Google's said that it can uncover those is to perform a search for that entity and see what types of things show up in search results, in titles, in snippets. So if I search for John Wayne and I start going through the search results for John Wayne, I know Westerns is definitely one of the attributes associated with John Wayne, because a lot of the search results talk about Westerns.
Detective.
So Terry,
the cop. Yeah, I don't think.
But even I think Terry just visualize it simply for people. Think of Majestic's categorizations and stuff. You know what I mean? That here's these how strongly related they are to these various different concepts and so on. Right?
I bet you that would be a very useful tool to use in this type of an audit, I would think.
You also want to look at sources like Freebase, and you want to go to Wikipedia. So my apartment complex is in Arlington, Virginia. So I'm going to go to the Wikipedia page on Arlington, Virginia. I'm going to type that in. I'm going to say, what else is in Arlington that's important?
Right, which is a good question. That'll help you just continue on that answer. But so I know, but at some point, you know, your client may not themselves understand what entities they should be related to. So you're coming in kind of cold turkey. So you know, when you guys are approaching this, you know, what you just mentioned a couple. So what kind of sources are you using to find the entities you want to relate to them if they're not intrinsically, you know, connected to that?
A lot of times you walk into doing an SEO audit for a site and you have to fill in a lot of the details of the objectives they have for their website. They don't always spell them out to you, no matter how much you talk to them in a kickoff meeting or follow-up meetings. So their existing website may, for a new client, may have an employment section, and you hadn't discussed that section of the website when you're doing SEO for it. You could stop and ask them, are there specific types of things that we should optimize this for, or are you still hiring? But you're making some assumptions, like you would with understanding nearby entities. Go back to my apartment complex situation. I'm going to assume that people who may want to move there are going to want to know things like, where are local schools? Is there a post office nearby? Is there some other stuff like that? What kinds of things do people look for when they move to a new location?
Tony, since you're here now, Tony had a question earlier, and I'll just let him go with it himself. But
Hi.
Hey, how you doing, buddy? I was actually going to bring up the one about the measuring results and stuff, so I'll let you just take it from there. It was your question anyway. So.
Hi, Bill. How you doing? Can you hear me okay?
I can hear you fine. Mm-hmm.
Awesome. Awesome. So my question was, once we have connected relevant entities, once we have associated them, once we have a story to tell on a website or a page or a topic, once we've got that in place and we've done our due diligence and done our work, what is the best way, other than that wonderful keyword ranking way, what way can we check to see when Google has added the entities together, when they've connected them? How can we tell when one semantically related topic to do with us or our website is now connected to another? What kind of checks can we do to show for ourselves? Because I kind of find that it's very much it's suck it and see. There's nothing tangible in many ways unless you try different types of searches and you go into the Google search bar and start typing in letters of a word to see what Google connects you to. So how can we monitor things?
There are tools in the world that involve identifying entities and where they're located and what talks about them. Mm-hmm. So some of them might tell you you've got a CEO named John Smith, mm-hmm. and you run this semantic tool on your website. It'll find John Smith, and it will tell you that there are articles about John Smith, your John Smith, at Wikipedia. There's an entry in Freebase, and the tools vary in terms of cost and so on, but some of them can tell you a fairly wide range of information about the entities that it might find on your website. So that's one way to go about things. If you look at what we have now in SEO in terms of things like tools that tell you about backlinks, Majestic, SpyFew, SEMrush, there are others, and the number of tools is growing, and it's probably going to happen with this type of entity audit, entity additions, mentions across the web. Google mentions a few, and there are softwares that deal specifically with entities at this point. So,
okay.
So that's one way.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so I mean, I was doing an online profile audit earlier today regarding a website, and they've got authorship in place. There's a number of different authors who post blog posts, really good blog posts, really rich in semantically related topics and terms. And I went to Vivante's, the beta, the author rank website where you can go in and type in your Google ID, and it will tell you, it'll give you an idea as to, the actual author rank, the author trust, and the author external rank as well.
Which I just wondered, that website made up themselves because Google doesn't necessarily have those.
Yes, yeah. I mean, I guess it's one of those things that, as you say, it gives an. I guess it gives again with most things with online and with SEO and with entities and with authors, it's a case of if it gives you an idea as to what it thinks, then it helps you along the road maybe slightly more. And it's the Vivanti one. So I did that, and there was 3 authors there, and as entities, that's what they are, each of those had differing levels of author trust, author rank, where they contributed to, etc.
And the Vivanti tool places probably too much importance on the page rank of the sites where the authors have been published, because somehow they got it into their heads that page rank was important when it came up when you're talking about an author rank. Nothing I've seen from Google expresses that in any way.
Okay. So is it to be trusted?
I asked a couple of people from Vivanti about why they would use a link analysis score on something that was supposed to provide a reputation score, and they sort of said, "Why not?"
Okay.
Because there's lots of sites with links to them that Google penalizes just for having too many links, so maybe that's not a good baseline measure. I'll just grab a Majestic API, and the guy with the most links wins. You've got authority.
Yeah, the justification was something like the quality of the site that you write at is an indication of what your reputation should be. It's not something I agree with. I think you could be a terrific writer on a site that maybe isn't linked to by everybody in the world yet.
But even if you write for a site which has a average to medium, whatever you want to say, I wouldn't say, well, I guess trust or rank.
Trust, authority, reputation, even. We were talking about the Google Rater guy a few weeks back, and they actually talk in there about reputation.
Yep. So if
Michael, turn down your speakers.
The justification was something like the quality of the site that you write at is an indication of what your reputation should be. It's not something I agree with. Okay, I'm hearing myself. Terrific writer on a site that maybe.
Yeah, Michael, mute your mic, brother.
Michael.
Yeah, that's him. He's listening to the show when he just came in. He still had it playing. So I was like, wow, Bill, didn't you just say that a couple of minutes ago? Is he going senile? Did something happen? Did Bill finally go crazy and he's repeating himself over here? Anyways, all right, man, go ahead. I think we got it now.
Yeah, I muted him.
No, yeah, he's muted his mic, so I think we're good.
No,
anyways.
I muted him.
I think they're in line with what Tony's even talking about. Comes another question. Selling a service like this, I'm going to take a flying leap here. That you guys aren't selling it as a standalone. It's part of your sort of startup and audit packages. Because I couldn't. This may I love the concept of entities. You know me. But trying to sell something like this to people, we're just coming out of the world of give me more links, and it's still apparently happening to a few dojo members, and so yeah, how are you guys really pitching this, or are you pitching it, or are you just selling an audit and putting this in as a layer of it, and then explaining to them why it's important later? You know what I mean? Like, how are you approaching this as a business, this kind of service, since it is obviously new and nobody knows about it, right?
Shall I answer the question, or is that for Bill, or?
Well, I don't care. I'm not selling it yet. So if you guys are, let me know, because I I'm
So-
not currently
I
doing
think
anything
he's
like this.
asking me how we still
Okay.
Right.
Yeah. I was curious how you guys are actually dealing with this as a company at GoFish. Yeah.
We do often start off with SEO audits for clients, but we do ongoing SEO work too. And an entity audit is often one of the things that we do that help uncover things like additional content that could be added to a site, or other things like that. So it's something that we do to help give them a sense of how the search engines are actually representing what's on their site at this point, and what types of things that we could add. So it's not something we charge a tremendous amount for, because it often has actionable items related to it that it helps uncover. And so we sort of use it as a segue into other services that we can provide.
Right. Yeah. It can work into your local presence. It can work into social presence. It can work into your, like you said, content strategy, like you were talking about. Right. So I guess what you're saying is that, yeah, it's that strategic stepping stone that helps uncover the strategy we want to use moving forward through our various next step efforts, kind of stuff.
Right. It's more of a discovery type tool.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Something you would do if you were going to build a new page, Bill, you might take a look to see what entities apply to that query.
Yeah, I think it's akin a lot to like even competitor analysis, because it's not really something that's producing a direct effect, but it's producing actionable elements you can use down the line. So.
Right. You know, with an SEO audit that we do for clients, the benefit of doing a deep dive through a site to find things to make recommendations on is that it provides actionable items that can help a site rank well for things, or can help improve a site in other ways. So it's sort of a lead-in to other services.
That assumes that people actually read them. I sometimes wonder about that, there, Bill.
When I do a SEO audit, I usually provide a executive summary at the beginning, where I go through the most.
Yeah, see, that's funny, Bill. I was talking to someone about the other day, because yeah, mine are like that in the sense that one of the things I took in college was business planning. And the executive summary is actually at the end. You do all your homework, you do all your research, get all your numbers. So my audits are the same. I actually do the audit, then I write the preface and the executive summary at the end. Because
I like putting it at the beginning, because then it's hard. If they didn't have time to read anything else,
they're gonna read that at least.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, Terry, and they can't say that you didn't make it obvious enough. You know, that's why I started doing that with my audits. You see important stuff right here, big flashing GIFs and stuff. You know, at least they can't say they didn't get it, because, the audits can get into 20, 30 pages, and so that executive summary, Terry, it's that big punch in the head, right?
Then we follow up with a call where we talk about the audit, and we start off with a question like, is there anything you have questions on?
Yeah, we start off with please tie up your developers onto chairs and bring them in the room and keep all the sharp objects away from them. They're not going to like us.
Yeah, it's good to have
especially the sharp objects.
But yeah, I think so much of it's still back and forth. Even the audits themselves are just uncovering starting points, and from there, I'm normally booking another 8-9 hours. I know I'll be talking to developers over emails or on Skype or wherever. The process has just begun when you even hand the audit in. Mm-hmm. I think a lot of people probably don't account for that as well as
I think that's one of the changes in the industry, Bill? We didn't used to get paid for a lot of the discovery before you took on an SEO client. You did that for free. That's why I like these SEO audits. Now we're getting paid for this shit.
People who used to go from one SEO firm to another asking them for a proposal, and people would write up proposals with
Yep, the fishing trip, man. The fishing trip. One of the first things Terry ever taught me, man. You gotta know when they're fishing and when to say, "That's all you're getting for free." I'm sorry, you know.
So
yeah, I used to get those. You know, what strategy are you gonna do for us if we pay you? Well, there's the thing, my friend. You're not getting that until you pay me. So.
Bill Bean's asking a question in the chat that is definitely worth discussing because it involves some things that we really haven't mentioned. What's the difference in entity optimization versus query optimization? So one of the things to keep in mind is that they have different goals. When a search engine indexes something to include as a website in response to a query, it's crawling the pages of a site. It's looking for links. It's looking for redirects. It's extracting information from a page and sending it to a index to be indexed based upon words or phrases found in those pages. When Google sends out extractors, information extractors to different pages, they pull all the information they find on the page into a area where data janitors that have different types of jobs look at the information and they're indexing objects. They're not indexing pages. They're indexing objects that they can find on multiple pages. They may keep track of which page which information is from. But the idea behind it isn't to index the web. It's to index mentions of specific entities or objects, cluster them, aggregate that information, and then put it into places like a knowledge base where the facts related to those objects can be searched. So it's got a completely different philosophical and physical approach.
Oh, you're saying the mechanism itself is just different. Google.
Well, yeah, and I think you're kind of using my new hatred for keyword optimization. I think where you do that you're saying query optimization, and again, yeah, you know what, like words are sort of the semantic graph that you're building around your entity, and I think to me at least, entities are accumulation of these different concepts as well as other external factors. So, you know, entity optimization to me is something that's built around that, not really the concepts, other than the fact you're tying concepts in at some point. But at the end of the day, when Google's returning stuff, they're taking this graph and that graph and putting certain importance on various ones, and that's what you're getting back in results. So it's just another cog in the wheel that we got to be looking at.
Well, I'm trying
especially since we can't build links anymore.
I'm trying to reconcile what Bill's clarifying about entities and when we get to actionable on-site actionable items, where it differs from the things we've done in the past. And let's forget the ridiculous things, but when we talk about on-site optimization, if one, we're not talking about keywords on the page, and two, we're not talking about anything like schema markup, what else is there to do?
Well, think of it as from a content development angle, like let's say a blog or evergreen content or something like that. It's because it's part of this discovery process, you now have new things that you should possibly be writing about. And maybe you were thinking about doing some buzzworthy thing, that's great, but does your content strategy also include the mentions of the important attributes and other entities that you want associated with that entity? So when you're thinking about that content strategy now, you're not just thinking in terms of, is it linkable, is it going to do well on social? Another layer of your content strategy now is what are the associations that we're making for this entity that we're working for, you know what I mean?
Right, so if I'm the apartment complex near Pentagon City, then are the things that I'm linking out to going to weigh on the janitor, the data janitor mechanism, or on the query side?
Okay, when we're talking about entities, it's best to like separate the concepts and get rid of them, throw them away. On-site, off-site, links, they don't matter. Throw them away. You're not ranking a specific page for a query. You're trying to improve how well an object shows up on the web, on your page, on other pages. Sure, you can use schema on your pages to help define it, identify it, give Google a better idea of what it is about. But the information doesn't have to be on your page. Let's say you represent Michael Jackson. You want Michael Jackson to do well in the world, sell a few records, open up an amusement park, whatever.
Records. Oh, Bill, we're showing our age again.
Right. Records. What's a record?
CD, man.
What's a CD?
I mean, illegal downloads. All right, Tim. All right, go ahead.
Okay. So to a degree, the whole web is yours, right? You can produce documents that don't have to be on your domain. You can produce stuff that is on your domain. You may want to focus more on stuff that is on your domain, but that doesn't mean you can't mention or include those things on other places too.
So you think in that terms then that weighs in on some of the importance of, let's say, a Google Plus profile?
Right. It can, absolutely. A Google Plus personal profile, a Google Plus business profile. Both of them can benefit you. You can have profiles in other places. You can put stuff that you created in multiple places too. If you're an author, you have a website, and you think it's a good idea to create an author page at Amazon.com and have links to all your books, it's going to help you.
Right. Any way you can connect the nodes, right?
Right.
Data points.
So you're an entity type. You're an author. Google's going to say, okay, I'm going to look at a couple different sources at the very least. I'm going to go to Freebase, and I'm going to look at Freebase to see what Freebase says. I'm going to go to Amazon.com. I'm going to see what books it says you've written at Amazon.com. They're consistent.
Yeah, I liked your little snarknado about getting rid of the links and stuff, and even building around the semantic concepts. So is what you're saying is you need to approach it clear just upon this one segment of entity, and forget all these other things from your thinking, because those are other layers that are separate and you could use later. But when you're thinking this kind of capacity, is what you're saying is to just clear your mind of these other things and just focus on these nodes and connections of entities.
No, I'm not saying that necessarily. I think that you can still keep the SEO separate from the entity audit stuff, and pay attention to both while you're looking at a site. But understand that links may not be that big a deal when it comes to your entities being recognized, and the facts that maybe are associated with them being recognized as the things you want them to be.
Bill, what about in your post about Michael Jackson? One of the things that you mentioned was this is in the context of Google might look at the number of documents, or looks at the number of documents related to an entity, and then
I was going to mention that.
And you were talking the specific thing, and I'll let you address that. Was you mentioned one of the things that also might factor into that is Google's confidence level of a particular document. So I was going to ask you about that too, kind of if you would define confidence level or at least conjecture.
Okay, so when you're determining probabilities, as in whether or not this particular document is important, Google's identified 2 different factors they might look at to decide whether or not a document's important. One of them is what the page rank of the document might be. So yeah, to a degree, links do play a role in this, or may play a role in this. The other is how much confidence there is that that particular document is about that specific entity. And the more confidence there is that it's about that entity, the stronger that document is. What Google also said in that section wasn't about the individual documents, but rather comparing different entities. So in that post, I mentioned 2 different Michael Jacksons. So let's say the Michael Jackson singer had 1 million pages on the web that were about him. So he was mentioned on 1 million pages on the web. The Deputy Director of Homeland Security, Michael Jackson, let's say he had 1,000 pages on the web that mentioned him.
So when you say mentions, are you talking about implicit links?
I'm talking about brand mentions.
Brand mentions. All right, so I had to be done. Oh, God.
Except most of the time people don't consider themselves brands.
Apparently Bill does. Well, no, he's an entity. So.
Bill, can you address say a little bit more about what you mean by confidence? When you talk about Google having confidence in something.
Okay. You're playing blackjack. Dealer gave you a 10. Dealer gave himself an ace. Which of you is more likely to win? The probabilities, the odds are that the dealer is going to win. Because that ace can either count as 11 or it can count as 1, right?
Statistical confidence.
So it's statistical confidence.
Okay.
Okay. With an entity, the confidence that you may have that entity is about that's mentioned on a page is about a specific entity. It may be that some of the facts about that entity on the page tend to match up more with a specific entity. So we're saying Michael Jackson.
Right, so if the data that is all over the place, if on one page it's got his birthday this, and this page it's got his birthday, that if it's not matching up as opposed to consistent documents across the web.
Right, we're going to look at facts related that are mentioned on that page. Born the same date as the singer, was in a group when he was young called the Jackson 5, is well known for the song "I Want You Back." As these facts about that individual on that page line up with the specific Michael Jackson you're thinking of, the level of confidence you have that page is about the singer increases. And that's what Google's doing in its analysis. It's looking for matching facts. When I mentioned earlier the similarities with local search, when Google collects information about businesses, it may cluster those based upon attributes that match: street name, street number, zip code, city name, and so on. And the more of those facts that match, the higher the confidence level. I
think it was a local either research paper, Pat, I don't remember which one, but I was reading something from them, and it was basically that: is the address consistent? Is the phone number consistent? If it's not, you know what I mean, it had less confidence because the information about that entity was inconsistent in a high percentage of documents, etc.
Right, and with some businesses, like a Starbucks, you have Starbucks that are on the same street, across corner from each other. So they've got the same street name, same city name, different street number, different phone number probably, but some of the facts are the same. If you want to separate them, you cluster them based on the facts, and you have 2 piles instead of 1 of facts.
Which I guess would be considered normalizing the data, I guess, wouldn't it? I guess.
To a degree, yeah. So there are multiple robots or data janitors that do this. There's like one data janitor that's like the happy birthday janitor because it just looks at birth dates. Different janitors do different stuff.
That begs the question of how often can I invite the janitors over to my site?
Well, if they work for Penguin, once a year or so.
I would guess that it's probably similar to how often you get Googlebot to come over.
Well, isn't that everything? Jarno, welcome. You had a schema thing you wanted to bring up, brother?
Yeah, I was curious about what Bill's opinion was about. He started saying that the problem with schema is it's only a limited set of types. That's not certainly true. It's basis. But at the same time, schema also offers the opportunity to pull in external enumerations, to pull in additional libraries, vocabularies, ontologies, you name it. So in a sense, adding types, if you're looking at the markup, is without limit. It all depends on how much you can find. But having said this, do you think there's value in going that far? Do you think it's worth to start adding so many extra ontologies and vocabularies, or do you think, spend the extra time on the content itself?
It's a difficult question, but I don't want to spend my life writing up schema specifically for certain entity types to help, especially when it means that I'm helping my competitors. So if I create a schema for breakfast restaurants, let's say there isn't one, and I'm doing SEO for Waffle House. I create a schema specifically for breakfast restaurants, so I'm sort of helping Dunkin' Donuts and Starbucks and other places that may serve breakfast too. Do I want to do that? Maybe not.
Can I ask? Hello?
Yeah.
Yeah, we got you, Miko. We got you.
All right.
Hold on, let me strap in before you start going, man. All right, I'm ready.
I just got one just to see if I get this right. So basically, if I want to rank for John Wayne, it's now also very important to have other words on your page and your website, like actor, westerns, movie, and that's basically what it is. That the more that your whole website fits that confidence level of being the accurate page, that's what you're talking about, basically.
Yeah, to agree, it's like what Google said when Google introduced the knowledge base, that short phrase, things, not strings. You want your page to be about John Wayne. You want to include words that are definitely associated with John Wayne.
Yeah.
So you put like the names of some of the characters he played. Rooster Cogburn, for instance. You put the names of some of the movies that he was in. You mentioned that he did perform in movies, that he won an Oscar award, stuff like that, and
basically, the more pages you just keep creating on your own website, that's now also a more powerful ranking tool.
It's a different ranking tool.
Yeah. additional.
It's an additional one. It's an extra additional layer. It may be a layer that Google is moving towards, rather than one that Google may be moving away from. But it's
Okay.
only an additional one right now.
Very good stuff, Bill.
Thank you.
Thanks for sharing.
Everybody,
Everybody very quiet, even me. Everybody listening.
now,
Yeah, Bill, who knew being lifeless geeks like us would have a purpose?
one of the potential problems I see with something like schema is it's got the same lack of reliability that things like meta keywords tags have. There was a guy named Cory Doctorow who writes science fiction who wrote a article in 2002. He called it something like the 7 Men of the Metacrap, where he gave 7 reasons why he didn't think that metadata was too trusted, and it went something like: number 1, people lie. Number 2, people aren't that intelligent. Number 3, and just because you can write metadata doesn't mean it's going to be accurate or trustworthy. There were people who were including review markup for rich snippets, or multiple reviews on a page where the product
TripAdvisor.
weren't even
I'm
other.
sorry. Are we on the air? I'm sorry. Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, sometimes schema is very helpful, but sometimes there isn't the appropriate schema for your page. Do you want to like do your job, or do you want to help create schema for the web? There's some people who like that. It's not uncommon, Jarno, to talk about structured data, but there's a lot of structure that Google pays attention to that isn't necessarily called metadata.
I completely agree. It's not the only way to do it, not even close. It's just one of the methods to do it.
Right. So
you choose perfect semantic HTML or optimized Freebase or whatever it is, it's just one of the methods to do it.
Are you familiar with Google's Web Tables project?
Heard of it, never played with it, never looked at it for deep.
Okay, so what they did was they, okay, if we go back to Google Sets, Google collected list information it found on the web. And it was to the point where you could enter 2 different types of things that could be said to be part of a set, and Google would return you others. So if I wanted to more names of cities in Virginia, and I went to Google Sets and I typed in the city I live in and maybe the city next to mine, Google might pump out 15 other cities that were in Virginia based upon those cities being in lists of Virginia cities. So there was something called the Web Tables project, where Google collected information found in tables on the web, not layout information, but database tables, and they included in there what the headings were for the ones that had headings. And there are a lot of tables on the web that are database tables that don't have headings. They don't actually label what's in the table, but you were able to create things like spreadsheets of all the presidents of the United States, and you could ask for a spreadsheet to be created like that, and it might add rows in that table that include the political affiliation of each of the presidents, the years that they became president, and and so on. It would take all that table data, look at the stuff that matched up well, look at the labels that were associated with it, and take that knowledge, consider the table's semantic structure. And so it was structured data, but it wasn't labeled structured data. And Google was, or it was only partially labeled. So Google was filling some of that in. So the guys who worked on that came up with a thing that would guess and label attributes for tables that didn't have tables based upon other tables on the web that may have been about the same thing. So it was taking semi-structured data, and it was filling the stuff in it found elsewhere. So I think in some cases, in some degrees, Google actually prefers to do some of the work themselves, because completely filled out schema data or metadata.
What are you saying? They're not going to trust SEOs and webmasters to get it right? Wow, shocking.
Yeah.
And that's something, I mean, other various Googlers I've talked to over the years about this, that, I think to a degree they've always realized adoption was going to be low, and then it was almost like this is a seed set of training data, in how some of the guys I talked to were about it, that they were using it as learning mechanisms to be able to develop, and like you're saying, is create their own broader depth in establishment. Well, you'll see tabulature data and stuff that looks like it's semantically marked up in the SERPs all the time. You go to the page, it's not. Google's still finding ways to deal with it to avoid the whole adoption problem.
And there are other ways for people to mark up stuff that allows you to identify them as belonging to specific entities. If you go through Wikipedia, they've got different types of templates. So for living people, for instance, they have one type of template. For people who aren't alive anymore, they have a slightly different template. But they include things like date of birth as a specific type of fact that there are different values for different people as you go through them. It's not schema, but it's something that Google might use, especially if they find the same words echoed as data about that entity in other places. So sometimes having lots of data is a good replacement for having stuff like strong algorithms or the paper, The Useful Effectiveness of Data, The Unusual Effectiveness of Data, which was based on another paper called The Unusual Effectiveness of Mathematics. But The Unusual Effectiveness of Data was created by a number of people at Google, including Peter Norvig. And it says that if you have lots and lots and lots of data, that can make up for really weak algorithms. I think if you have lots and lots and lots of data, it can make up for things like not having a lot of schema markup. Okay.
You're fucking fun at a party, buddy. You know how to kill a room, eh? Why did Bill over for a beer? He's trying to talk about patents. Never went to sleep. Well, what happened to everybody? Oh God. Any other questions out there, folks? Come on, we're only 2 hours in. Have we got there yet?
How's Bing doing with entities?
Sorry?
How's what?
How is Bing doing with entities?
Bing is really odd, and I'll tell you why. They bought PowerSet like 4 or 5 years ago, and they were using it to mark up entities in Wikipedia. And you used to be able to go look up those Wikipedia articles, and they would link the entities, so you can find out more about the entities mentioned in Wikipedia articles. Then one of the guys from PowerSet left Microsoft to start some fashion website.
Bill, Lisa's got to run, so she's hoping to run into you next week, apparently.
Are you going to be there, Lisa?
Yeah, I just signed up, so it's kind of a last-minute thing for me. So I'm excited. I saw the agenda, and it looks amazing. Yeah. So I hope to talk to you there.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Awesome. Thanks so much. I love this topic. Thank you.
Thank you.
No problems. Thanks for joining us.
Okay, see you guys later. Bye-bye.
Bye.
All right, back to it.
Well, I got a question.
Yes?
Brands as an entity. But if my brand name is not what the word I want to rank for, if I just have it around a lot, will that still help? Just from association.
When I see people talking about brands, I think of somebody asking Eric Schmidt if brands helped when it came to SEO. And Schmidt looked at them and said, yeah, brands are good. And the next day, there were like 30 or 40 articles in the SEO community saying, brands are good. Okay, so sort of take the concept of brand with a grain of salt. Think of it, if somebody mentions a brand is an entity, right? Mm-hmm. So entities are named entities or specific people, places, or things, and a brand is a thing. It could be the name of a business, it could be a product line, or so on, but it's still an entity. So if you talk about them in terms of brands and ignore the fact that they're entities, you miss out on all the things that Google says it does with entities. Okay, so brand's an entity. A brand is known by multiple names. An entity can be known by multiple names. So International Business Machines is also IBM, is also Big Blue. Let's say that the owner of IBM woke up one morning and decided he hated the color blue. And he might tell everybody, okay, let's get rid of everywhere on the web that says we're Big Blue or where they link to us. We want to be found for IBM, but not Big Blue. Okay, so it's sort of like a changing around the brand, but it's everything that you can do to change entity associations on the web.
Okay, I get that. That's kind of synonyms. But what I basically mean, if IBM simply has IBM or Big Blue out there,
mm-hmm.
the more will they rank better for computers. Wow, that was a tough one.
Okay, so.
Well, I thought we finally stumped Bill. After all these years, I thought we had him.
I'm having is everybody says, so does this rank for this?
Yeah, okay, I put it very simplistic, of course.
It's not matching relevance. It's not doing page rank. There's none of that crap. It's if your entity is known for being a computer manufacturer. And because Big Blue, IBM, International Business Machines are seen as synonyms of each other, identifying the same entity, it doesn't matter what the name is, as long as that association with computers is still pretty strong. As long as the search is one that might be based on attributes of the entity. So a business that makes
can we use it in the builder?
That's located in North Carolina.
Right. So, Bill, is it kind of like saying that someone puts in the Google SEO by the sea, it's kind of meaningless on its own. You know what I mean? It's the entities associated with it that Google would find and understand, meaning you or whatever. But merely putting in SEO by the sea as 4 words doesn't mean anything without the association to go with it.
Google recognizes that it's an entity.
Right.
It's a brand.
That's what I'm saying. But the words themselves, without associations to that entity, you know what I mean? Is what we're talking about. So it's not necessarily a ranking factor per se as something you want to go out and target. It's more about associating the concepts and the trust and the authority and elements around entities and the attributes like you were talking about earlier. It's better understanding this entity and what it is that helps Google to know what search terms to bring it back for.
Right. So Google's seen IBM on a lot of pages. It's seen computers on a lot of those pages too. So it knows that IBM makes computers, but that association exists because of so many mentions on the web of both words on a lot of the same pages. So that relationship is created that way.
And computer-related websites and all of that. But why I ask is like, for example, for local search.
Right.
If you were to go to very local specific websites and just drop your some way somehow get your brand name on there, then that should then help to rank better in local search for that. Let's say you go to a website, New York, or a bunch of them, and you get you want to take that call?
No.
Probably just be his mom.
Wanted to stop. I take it.
Hello, I would like to get access to your computer. I am calling from Windows, and we believe if you would just give me the remote desktop, we will help you fix on your problem.
So the idea of being seen as an entity is something that happens because you're mentioned on a lot of websites.
Yeah, but I'm of course talking about manipulating it.
You're talking about what? Manipulating
it and making it happen.
So scale it. Scale it.
What?
Scale it.
But just putting your brand name on one website, Google's going to speed past it, say, is this an entity? I don't see it. Bye. You're wasting your time doing that.
Not once, of course, but to associate. Look, what I've been up to lately is to try and get more on websites that are.
I think it's even telling that you said, Mikhail, I think it's even telling that you said.
I said you're wasting your time.
No. I think it was telling that he didn't say this is what I've been doing lately. He said this is what I've been up to lately. Even those words makes me think, oh, okay.
Okay, so you get your brand on 20 pages. There are how many pages on the web?
Well, as long as there's more than the competition, that should make something, no?
Nah.
No, I think, again, Mikhail, this is almost something to combat that sort of scalable SEO approach. Meaning, if you're not a real entity, if you don't actually exist or whatever, it's a cross-check they can use to figure this out. You got an influx of links this week, and who cares? Because we can look at you as an entity as a whole and understand you as associating to other entities. This is almost a check in place. Wes, holy shit, dude!
Yeah, been a while. How you doing, Chris?
Mr. Wes, pleasure to see you, brother.
Been a while.
Miss you, man. We miss you, dude. Good to see you.
So Google's going to try to find not only mentions of your name, but also attributes that you possess, facts that can be associated with your business. And if it's not finding those, it may not make those associations.
Right.
If they're inconsistent from one place to another, again, it may not make those associations.
Right, which helps build the trust and the authority. These are the fuzzy numbers people talk about, trust and authority and stuff, but these are kind of little building blocks within that, no?
Mm-hmm. When you're trying to rank for something like computers, stick to SEO.
Yeah, I thought this was SEO, but okay.
If you're a real business and you actually make computers, that's another matter. If you
but I'm talking about a company that does that. Of course, I'm not talking about myself, right? Okay, let me ask it different. For example, a company that does something that is eco-friendly, supposedly, but has not really anything to do with the environment or something like that. Would it make sense, if you want to rank for eco-friendly related strings of words and entities, to focus more on, you know, the environment type of marketing, you know, to get your attention from that area?
I know Aretha Franklin.
And achieving that by really dropping your brand name.
For president, but she's never going to be confused by Google as the president of the United States. There's just not enough. Okay, so a company that you want to somehow have associated with environmental good that doesn't actually do anything.
No, it does. It does. It does, but it's not, for example.
I'm not going to discuss ways to attempt to manipulate entities.
Yay!
I'm asking the question wrong. Okay, so I got.
No, but I think you're also missing the concept of the entities, in the sense that you're trying to relate semantic concepts to an entity, and that's not really the same. Again, by entities, you're relating either attributes or values, or relating it to other entities that are outside and externally associated with it. So, yeah, you know, it's again, I don't think it's keyword targeting we're talking about, or am I missing something?
Bill, would it be safe to say that if you were optimizing entities, you're more optimizing the attributes of the entity rather than the entity itself?
They're part of the same thing, so
okay.
To a degree. I mean, Michael Jackson could be a Homeland Security deputy, he could be a singer. But the only way that Google's going to tell which one is which is by knowing what those attributes are.
Sorry, right. So determining which attributes are the most important would also, I assume, be part of your audit as well?
Yeah, we want to try to identify attributes that not only help search engine understand more,
users too,
but your visitors, your pages too. So when I talk about that apartment complex, I want to make sure that I mention it has a swimming pool, and maybe have lots of pictures of the swimming pool so people want to move in and go for a swim.
So Bill, but let me play devil's advocate. I'm having trouble connecting that with the entity dynamic, because that sounds like optimizing for a query or conversion optimization. How does that tie into that?
How do you tell one entity from another?
By the end.
Change my query.
How do you tell one entity from another?
Based on different attributes of who they are, what they do, what their reputation is, what their location is, what their brand awareness in my mind is.
So I'm not focusing on queries when I say that Michael Jackson lives in Washington, D.C., works in a government office building,
Right, because those aren't queries that are going to come up that you're not trying to rank for those terms. You're trying to associate to those concepts or those entity attributes.
Well, no, I'm just going off of. I'm telling you what throws me off is when Bill says I want to on my page make sure I let people know we have a swimming pool.
Right, because that's an attribute of an apartment complex. Dog park, swimming pool, atrium, restaurant inside. These are attributes of that apartment complex.
And the whole point for that client is so that if people search for an apartment complex near Pentagon City that has a swimming pool,
Google can associate all those attributes to an entity.
Right. Google.
Is that how they kind of store their tokens now, Bill? Is like as attributes rather than tokens of keywords? In the past?
I don't know.
Okay.
Okay.
Sorry. I asked Bill a question he couldn't answer.
Last time I was at the Googleplex, one of Matt Cutz's minions came up and started talking to him, and I may have been the only person who didn't work at Google who understood the question he asked and which patent it related to and stuff like that. And I made fun of him in comments at Search Engine Land about a month later, and he sort of did a oops. I categorically deny. But yeah, usually I don't know how they store stuff.
Okay. But that would seem reasonable in that's kind of how they did keywords too, right?
Big posting lists at Google, and they may have added phrases to those within the past 4 or 5 years as well as just keywords, and I think they likely did.
When they went to the phrase-based stuff rather than
right.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
But I was just using that as an example, Bill. Like that seems like the natural way to kind of hook up all these different attributes, right?
Yeah, and a lot of the patents that talk about this stuff try to talk about them as if they're separate inventions, and that they have a hardware element to them instead of just like being one huge database. They may be, and the phrase-based database interacts with the. So what kind of data system does the knowledge base exist within? I don't know. Except there is one. So when we have one of these searches that involve the attributes of a particular entity, Google's searching through those attributes to find swimming pool, to find Northern Virginia, to find
like a reverse lookup, then find the attribute, find the entities that go with it.
Right. Find the attribute, find the entity.
Right.
And what about
that's 13.
city? Because that's as well that could be an entity or an attribute.
What about what?
A city.
Right.
Sydney. I mean, Sydney itself is an entity, right?
Yeah.
But if some company in Sydney want to be recognized as being located there, then actually Sydney becomes an attribute.
Right. So Michael Jackson, the guy who works at Homeland Security, lives in the city Washington, D.C.
That's an attribute.
That's an attribute.
To the entity of the name.
Michael Jackson as the entity. Right.
Yeah. But Washington, D.C. as a city could also be an entity on itself.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
But that's why I was confused before.
So
I would say most attributes are probably some kind of entity of some sort, Bill, to be an attribute.
Not necessarily always, but
quite often.
Often, yeah. So when I did the audit for the apartment complex, and I started going through the Wikipedia page for the neighborhood it was located in, I started looking at all and grabbing and making lists of other entities
that were mentioned.
that were in that neighborhood, and they weren't all necessarily attributes of that apartment complex, but some of them were. You know, the fact that it's located in Arlington, Virginia, that's an attribute. Its location, right? That it had a swimming pool, that's an attribute. That's one of the amenities it offers. That it had a dog park. It's another one. That it was over like Pentagon City, which is one of the largest shopping malls in Virginia and mostly underground. It's both a related entity and it could also be said to be an attribute because there's so much shopping pretty much on site there. You know, some of the stuff I learned going through that site and doing the entity audit for it included things like they should really have a map of the Washington Metro on their website and show off all the other places you could get to within less than half an hour by taking the elevator down to the metro station and hopping on.
And but if the word apartment complex, would that in that case also be an entity then?
Well, no, because those are descriptive words. An entity is a person, a place, a thing, an event, etc. You know what I mean? It's different. An entity is not an apartment complex. Now, that might be an attribute of an entity at some point, but along the chain. But I don't think an entity is an actual thing. It's something. It's like saying,
and you may.
It's like they say. It's like me saying this is a lighter. This is a lighter, but this lighter is not a fucking entity. But now, if I look around and I find a manufacturer name on this thing somewhere, that's the entity associated with this lighter, right?
Right.
Okay. But that's okay. I get it now. I get it.
Lighter, the size of the lighter, the
right, the color, the dimensions, how quick it lights, how hot it burns.
Mm-hmm.
All right. No, I get it now. I didn't ask it right before, but I get it now. Thanks.
Oh man, Journo's opened up the case now. An entity is the lighter is an entity. Damn it!
Damn it! It's an entity.
That's awesome.
What is important is the relation between the lighter and its creator, or the person who sells it.
Right, exactly. And the attributes of the lighter itself.
You might want to buy it.
Right.
In that sense, something as little as a lighter can be an entity. Yeah, look at an e-commerce site. It's full of entities.
Right. It's a thing. It's got to be an entity, right? It's a thing.
So if you have an e-commerce site that sells 100,000 products and you use schema for each of them, it's going to help Google identify and differentiate all those products a lot easier.
Yeah.
That's where it gets where it helps a lot more than say just on a
especially on an e-commerce
site. Eh, Bill, would you say?
I think it's probably easier because Google doesn't have to try to figure out the layout of your website. Because if you have that many products, you probably are really consistent with your descriptions of different elements or aspects of those products. What material they're made out of, how big they are, what color they are, stuff like that. So you have a lot of attributes, and you use a markup to like Wikipedia does with all the templates it has.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
I just want to say, screw you, Doc. I just looked for F13. Very funny. Wow, boys and girls, that was sad.
What is F13?
Because it doesn't exist. I actually looked for it. Yeah, thanks, Doc.
F12 on my keyboard.
No, your computer's broken, Dave. You don't.
Yeah, wrong keyboard. I don't know.
Go get the right keyboard.
Yeah.
Computers.
I keep looking for that any button too when I'm on sites. It says press any button. I'm looking around. None of these say any of them.
It's right next to the A button.
All right. So Bill Bede was saying, how do we move further from the esoteric to the actionable? Okay, Bill. I'm gonna just for me and Doc's fun say it depends, but again, actionable. When you talk about discovery stuff, meaning competitor analysis or the entity audits and things like that, things that are sort of research-driven activities. What comes out of them at the other end for me, and I'll let Bill and anyone else who wants to address it after. What comes out of that for me is what becomes actionable, and that's going to depend on the situation and the client and the goals of that business and so on and so on and so on. So, from what I'm getting, at least how I'm going to use a lot of the information that I've been learning with Bill the last week or so, is again, it's part of that research process. It's almost pre-actionable, meaning, it's helping build the blocks of other things going forward. So, I mean, I don't know if I can say, and go and write a blog post about how to use an entity audit to be actionable. I think you could, but that's still going to be situational, at least for me. Each situation I think is going to be different in what the goals are and how you're going to use this kind of stuff. So.
Well, even the way you do the research would depend on what you're trying to find out. What I've learned from this is a big part of content creation. Is when you're building your pages, you want to figure out what attributes are the most important to be in that page. That's the biggest thing that I pulled from this, is that instead of thinking in the keywords now, we're thinking in concepts and kind of like
go back to graphs again, Terry, like a social graph, like a semantic graph, like a link graph, like a what I mean? It's another graph layer, I think.
I think I compare it to like programming with object-oriented programming. It's kind of similar.
Well, I still think you're
for this crowd, but
you're right, David. This thing is going to yield to actionable, and that's kind of what I want to get to. And it's situation specific, right? We know that, but if we said, here are the most common things that tend to come out of something like we're talking about an entity audit, right? Out of all the things that could happen, in the last 6 months, these 5 things have been the things we ended up having to do with somebody, or needing to do.
I got you. So, Bill, what we're after is, how are you justifying your time spent on entity audits at the end of the day? What are some common benefits that you're finding? I know it's been 4 months, so it's it's early days, but what are some of the common benefits or directions or things that you're finding that you could pigeonhole to a degree? Is that what you're saying, Bill B?
Yeah, and Bill alluded to some things already. He said, about content on the page and hitting attributes, right? So something as simple as what we may discover is that your content is just too ambiguous.
Mm-hmm. So that's definitely part of it. Make sure that you're including the important things on the page that people want to find, that help them tell your entity apart from other entities that may perform similar functions.
So if you had a product, you want to list all the features of the product, right, Bill? Like that kind of thing?
Right. If there are 2 products out on the web with very similar names, is yours unique? Are you presenting it?
Right. And if I'm Google, do I want to bring back the one with the most attributes to that product, or the one with the least? So I'm assuming they're going to want to bring the one with the most.
In local search, when Google came out with the local search patent on identifying authoritative websites for a business, one of the things they stressed in there was, does it contain the most information about that business? Does it include things like hours of opening, hours of closing, whether or not it has assistive technology for people with handicaps, if it has parking and what the hours of parking are, and whether or not they validate, and blah blah, other stuff that makes it a source of information about that particular business that other sites about that business don't include.
Right. So, Bill, so putting that into action, right, would be if somebody was saying, here's a difference between just a business directory that will let me drop a link in it, as opposed to one that has a robust profile that's comprehensive.
Right. Right. And profiles that are comprehensive, that let you put a lot of information in that help define the business, help define your business as an entity by describing attributes associated with it.
Right.
So what I was saying about the authoritative type site for local, to a degree, that's also the type of site that Google might recognize when you use the name as an entity in a query. Now, Microsoft did a study a couple years ago where they said that they find entities in 20% of the queries that get performed with other words in addition to them, but that they find that 70 or so % of the queries performed at Bing are just entities. That's a lot.
Would you consider it to be a navigational search, I guess?
They can be, and that's one of the things that you would do in this entity audit.
Yeah. Figure out whether it's transactional or informational, etc. Right, Bill?
See if Google is going to list your authoritative website associated with the entity as #1 always when your entity is included in the query.
When you were mentioning about the store hours, something else that I thought of is I wonder if they could use the kind of analysis you're talking about in the trust factoring as well. So the business that includes its store hours, right, is more trustworthy than the business that just says, yeah, we're located here.
Yeah, but even think of the confidence kind of score stuff, Terry. Is your store hours on Yelp different than the stores on your site that's different from your store hours listed on this other, offsite page? What is the confidence of the information across various documents,
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, I think even that might be actionable to a point. Is making sure, like, would you look at those kind of things, like Google Places and Yelp and stuff, and ensure that the data about your entity is consistent across all of them, including your website?
There are a couple services that'll do like citation check for you, where they'll tell you whether or not different places your business is mentioned at are consistent or not. Right, Bill. In places like White Spark and Bright Locos, Bill Bean.
Yeah, and again, because I read stuff that when we were talking about confidence scores earlier, that even in the local world they actually look at that. How consistent is the information across various locales?
Right. So I did an entity audit for a school, and the school had at least 4 different online degree programs at different points of time over the past 7 or 8 years. And I'd probably want to go check out other mentions of the school elsewhere in the web, other pages, other documents that mentioned the online degree programs, and see if we wanted to change those so that they were consistent on all the pages. Because ideally we sell only really the latest
Right, and you're going to strengthen that confidence score of the data on the web about this entity by doing so.
Right, because the online degree program is an entity too. Right, so it's an attribute of the school, but it's also the degree program itself is like a product line. It's an entity unto itself.
See, Bill Bean, it only took us 2.5 hours to get it actionable. Welcome to the dojo.
Yeah, so the consistency is important. It's more important in this than stuff like links. Absolutely.
Everything is more important than links.
Well, I don't know, Terry. Are your wheels turning, Terry? I know you'll not be talking about this for the next week or so.
Like brand mentions?
Yeah, just like brand mentions. Definitely. It's up there in my top 10 list at the moment.
Need them. Fuck the links. Let's get them mentions.
Oh, yeah, well,
they're not the new link building. I'm sorry.
No. PR is. Or no, it's social. No, content marketing's new. Hold on, I'm not sure. What is the new SEO?
I thought it was entity optimization.
No, inbound marketing, entity optimization, brand mention services. I think I'm pretty close in there.
Can you get a few more keywords in there, Dave?
Yeah, I'll try and see what I can do. .com. Going for the EMD, baby. Yeah. Wow.
So if brands are good, entities are better. And
yeah, that's what we eventually had to succumb to, Bill, because of Eric. It's all Eric's fault, so we got to pick up the pieces.
Oh no, I think for a lot of people, entities, they have a hard time going from the keywords to the entity stuff, doing that crossover. Because you have to do kind of look at things different.
Well, yeah, it's a mindset change. But I think, too, Terry, I see an awful lot of people that always, whenever entity is mentioned, they seem to think that it means JCPenney, Sears, IBM. They don't think about Joe Smith or the hotel, or, they don't think in terms of things. They think in terms of brands and people as opposed to what entities really are. And I think
Doc, you're a writer, so I try to I don't think it's quite, it's simplified, but I say nouns, because we all learn that in school, person, place, or thing, or whatever, and I try to begin their understanding on that kind of level, that you're thinking about things as opposed to, concepts or words or whatever,
Yes. Exactly. And that's a good way to look at it.
Well, part of the difficulty, right, that we're up against is it still seems on any given day, optimizing for keywords and getting links gets business. We're just all convinced, I think, most of us, that's limited.
That's gone crazy, apparently.
Right? We don't know how long it's going to be limited.
But I do now.
Yeah, I think we agree that this has got to be the trajectory, Google's trajectory. And most of us probably want to work with businesses who want to try to be where the puck is going, not where it is now.
The puck. Oh, you're an honorary Canadian now, my friend.
I optimize a law office for local search, which is almost exactly the same thing as optimizing for entities. And the phone started ringing at 3 times or 4 times rate within a couple weeks. It's one of the most effective things you can do for a lot of businesses with locations to make a difference in the return on investment almost immediately.
Well, I think you've made that point strongly, Bill, saying as far as like a niche goes, that the local niche is the very first place that the entity thing is mattering the most. Like it's having practical today impact.
Mm-hmm. Google's been working on that one for 9 years, though.
Yeah.
It's the proof of concept. It shows the rest of it will work someday by its effectiveness now.
Yep.
Right. Bill, if your client was Michael Jackson of Homeland Security, what would you be doing for him?
I don't know. He's probably got some corporate job that pays real well right now, working for somebody else.
It seems like there's some good reputation management, though. There's like some real practical niche for at least people when it comes to entity I know I've seen people talk about that immediate impacts of things, connecting the dots, so to speak, for Wikipedia and even for Freebase, for people who are trying to get something changed in the knowledge graph or get something there.
There are other things you want to look at for reputation management that maybe you could look at for entity optimization too, but people tend to be more concerned about things like autocomplete, which shows up there on
Right.
person's name.
So sentiment is not currently an attribute, right? We don't know for sure.
Google's working on it. They came out with a patent about 4 weeks ago that discusses reviews and sentiment in reviews. They had done that before, but the patent that they had released before didn't actually mention things in local search as entities, and this time it does. But you know, that tells me that Google's probably going to bring entity analysis into the world of entity optimization too. So we may start seeing more things in places like knowledge panels that involve sentiment analysis.
I got another one. Bruce Willis, right? Everybody knows he's an actor.
Uh-huh.
But then he started some blues band. So let's say I am Bruce Willis, and everybody knows me as an actor, but now I want to be known as a blues musician. What I do?
Release a
record. No, we had that with hold on.
Release a record when you start.
Yeah, I'm gonna take this off the air. So anybody actually still watching out there, feel free to join us or whatever. I'm gonna stop.